I could say it this way. Today, the way we live our lives as Americans, the way our government functions, is absolutely nothing like what the framers intended it to be. What they intended was clearly described in the Constitution. Let's just take a brief foray, if we can, into that Constitution. You know, because you're here tonight, you're obviously people who care about these things, that our Constitution has 7 articles. 3 of them deal with housekeeping things, like how you amend and stuff like that. The other 4 deal specifically with how our government is intended to function. So one of those articles deals with the legislative branch, that's Article 1, and it is very brief. You could read it in just a few minutes. Article 2 deals with how the presidency, the executive branch, is going to function. Article 3, the judiciary, and Article 4, you know what it is, right? It's the states. We know the 10th Amendment says that everything not specifically enumerated given to the federal government goes to the state. So that's how our Constitution is written. You see, the way that the framers designed it, they wanted our federal government to be small and limited. If you and I took a look at that Article 1 that talks about what Congress can do, we know Congress is the Senate and the House, and I'm running for a seat in the House. If we took a look at Article 1, which is the manual for how Congress is to operate, we would find that there are 18 specific things that Congress can do. Only 18. And the reason that it's written that way is because the framers wanted the federal government to be small and limited. So they enumerated 18 things. This is what you can do, these 18 things. The other thing that the framers did was they set up a system whereby each branch of the government has something to hold over the other branches. It has some leverage that it can use to keep the other branches in check. And you know this, don't you? So each branch of government has its check and balance. Since we're talking about Congress, let's talk about its weapon, if I can call it that. What it can use as a check and balance in government. What it can use is money, frankly. Congress is the only branch of the government that was designed to handle spending. All spending, according to the Constitution, has to go through Congress. And if you and I looked at those 18 enumerated items, it talks about the kind of things we can spend money on. What's happened, though, the evolution of our nation, is that we have moved away from being a nation of laws. Can I just parenthetically say, the reason that happened is, in my belief, is because we're fallen creatures and we don't like absolutes. We don't like laws. We don't like to be told exactly what we can or can't do. And we find ways to ignore things that are laws and things that are absolutes. We'll kind of write our own, or we'll reinterpret them. And that is exactly what's happened in Congress. What Congress has done is it said, yeah, there are 18 things spelled out in the Constitution, but we're going to spend money on some other things. And as a result, our government is doing things never before intended by our founders. For instance, the founders never intended for there to be a retirement program run by the federal government. And we got one. It's Social Security. I recognize the importance of Social Security, that people have paid into it. And I'll be the first to say that we need to honor every dollar paid into Social Security. But the truth is, there's nothing in those 18 enumerated items that says we should have a federal retirement program. There's nothing in there that would give you Obamacare. It's not in the Constitution. Now, I could go on and on and on and on. And as a result, we've spent money that the founders never intended the federal government to have. All those programs, all those nice things, are supposed to be run by the states. So the way it's supposed to work is you have a small federal government. People get to keep a bunch of their money. The heaviest taxes go to the states, and the states determine what kind of social program they will have. So you might have one state, let's say South Carolina, and South Carolina may say, you know, we really like these social programs. We're going to tax our people just a little bit more, but they have these safety nets. And you might see Texas, and Texas says, no, you know what, everybody's for himself. We're not going to tax you. There's going to be no social programs in Texas. And that is how the framers envisioned it. Small federal government, each state determining its own way. And that is what we got to get back to. Now, are we going to do that tomorrow? No. Are we going to do it next year? Probably not. I was 23 years old. And I found myself standing on a pier in Saudi Arabia during Operation Desert Storm. And the reason I was there was because in the early days of the war, I had the job of driving a truck. Now, the Marine Corps didn't train me to drive a truck. They just needed somebody to haul bombs up to the front, and I knew how to drive a tractor trailer. So, as is the way of the Marine Corps, I got the job. So I'm standing on this pier, waiting for my truck to be loaded with ordnance. Military people here? Anybody? Any veterans? There we go. We got a bunch of them. We know what ordnance is. Ordnance is a fancy word for bombs and bullets. Okay, explosives. So join with me, if you would, that night on the pier. It's late at night. I'm there by myself. I've got my truck, and I'm waiting for the guy to load the bombs onto my truck. All around me are literally acres of bombs and bullets. This was the ordnance dock. Along those piers were ships that were either full of ordnance or had just offloaded their ordnance, massive ships. And as I was there that night, waiting for them to put the bombs onto my truck, a horn went off. Now, those of you that are old enough to remember those days probably know what I'm going to talk about when I say there were Scud missiles coming in. You remember that? Remember watching that on television, the Scud missiles? And there were Scud missiles that were coming in to that pier where I was standing. It was going to be a very interesting fireworks display. And I was going to be one crispy dude if those Scuds hit that pier. The Scuds went off. I could physically see them in the sky. And I began to run. And I was running for the bunker. And it dawned on me, this sandbag bunker, it ain't going to do me no good at all. It's not going to do me any good. And then there was the thwop of Patriot missiles. We still have them today. And as I ran, those Patriots climbed the sky, intercepted those Scuds, and they exploded over my head. I think as a nation, we've got some Scuds that are inbound. We've got some things that are going to cause our ruin. We talked about spending. We could talk about lots of others. We could talk about the disintegration of the American family. That would be one. We could talk about the erosion of other constitutional liberties, like the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, and other things. We've got Scuds that are inbound, and even among our own party, the Republican Party, we don't know where to run. Everybody has a different idea, but nobody knows exactly where the safe harbor is going to be. Well, I'm not brilliant, and I didn't come up with this myself, but I've done some reading, and I think I know where the safe harbor is. The safe harbor is the Constitution of the United States, and that's where we need to run to. We need a disciplined effort to herd this government, to shape this government back into what the framers intended. And that's what I propose to be about. I'm not the only one who thinks that way. There are lots of folks who think that way. We need another one from the 1st District who thinks that way. Because if we don't, if every man just kind of runs where he thinks is best, we will never turn this ship around. That is where we must go. Now, I can't do that myself. If you say to me, yeah, Curtis, why don't you go to Washington, D.C. and do that? Well, I would be a fool to believe that I can do that. I'm one of 435. I can't do that. But you know what? We can do that. I'm bold enough to believe that we can do that. I am bold enough to believe that we, the people of the 1st District, can be a major force in making that happen, if we will. But here's what I get. I'm sitting at a dinner a couple weeks ago of Jewish businessmen downtown talking about my candidacy. And they were kind enough to endorse my candidacy and help with it. But as I sat there, the gentleman to my left said to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter even if you go up there. There's nothing we're going to be able to do. This country is over. And I've heard that again and again. And candidly, it makes me angry. I wanted to jump up on that table